Perrier. Greg Perrier is my professor avatar. And whoops, let me copy what I want to say in the chat. I'm going to be talking in voice, and I will add stuff in the chat here for you so that those of you who might not hear my voice well or who don't understand my English very well or whatever can have a copy of what I'm actually talking about. I'm a professor in biology at the Northern Virginia Community College, which we call NOVA. This is up by Washington, D.C., a little bit west of Washington, D.C. And I want to share with you some of the lessons that I have learned from the last 7 years of doing education in virtual worlds, primarily Second Life, but a little bit in OpenSim too. First off, I want to give you a little bit on my background, just so you have an idea where I'm coming from. I came into Second Life in January of 2010 at a professional development workshop that my college was given. They had quite a few different sessions, and one workshop was on Second Life. And I'd recently read an article in a magazine that showed a professor in front of a classroom talking to students. And I thought, well, that would be interesting to try, and would be useful for things like snow days when the campus was closed or something. And so I went to the workshop and was excited to see that we actually had a campus. I hadn't known that in Second Life. I saw myself as teaching face-to-face classes in Second Life. That was my initial idea. But I soon learned that this really is not that easy to do. It's quite complicated, and it's actually not the best use of virtual worlds for education. So I spent the first 6 months of my time in Second Life, one, learning how to get around and do things, but also visiting a lot of education areas, campuses, and things, and talking to many people in Second Life. I tended to spend a lot of time at the ISTE regions. They had 3 regions at that time. It's the International Society for Technology and Education. And I just met a lot of people. They had landmarks to go visit other regions, other campuses, and saw what people were doing. Visited many beautiful campuses that no one was using, but I also encountered some exciting builds that were being used, and I learned a lot just by going around looking at things. I started bringing in students, doing office hours. These office hours I did office hours jointly in real life in my office and in Second Life. Quite a few students started coming to my Second Life office hours. Just they could come from home or from a coffee shop or from work. Some of them came. And so that was interesting, and I was doing that at the Nova campus, but they wouldn't let me build there very much. The manager had it the way they wanted, and so another community college in Virginia called Tidewater actually had a campus in Second Life, and they invited me to come down there. They gave me a parcel and said, go ahead and do what you want there. And so I started doing my first interactive builds down at Tidewater Community College in the Virginia Beach area. And it was interesting yesterday, when Abby was being interviewed, they talked about making a glucose molecule, how that was kind of easy. Well, that was my first build, and my students were actually making glucose molecules, and we still have that. In January of 2012, I was asked to come back and take over the management of our campus. The old manager had retired and moved out of state, and so I came back and took that over. The year before, 2011, we had no faculty and no students on the campus working. Last year, starting with, say, fall 2015, spring semester 2016, and summer 2016, we had over 800 students on campus. And we had, I don't know how many faculty members sending students in there. It's hard to keep track of that. So we have a very active campus now. And we've come a long ways. And I've made a lot of mistakes, I've learned a lot of things. I've learned from other people's mistakes. I've learned from my own mistakes, but I've also learned from other successes, and I've learned from my own successes. So I want to today to share with you some of that. One of the things that I have done is also just sat down about 8 months ago and started to say, what is it that I have learned from all this? What can I share with people about all this experience? 7 years isn't the most. A lot of people have more years than I do, but what have I learned from this? What is useful to share? I've come up with 66 lessons, and you'll get at the end, you'll get a URL for my blog where you can go in and see all those. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about all those today. In 17 different ways, I've identified that educators can use virtual worlds as a tool for their classroom, for their lecture, for their pedagogy, and also for professional development. So we've learned a lot. And so how do we get this information out and share that? And part of this is just kind of sharing some of that with you. So I wanted to share today just some things that have emerged from these reflections. And the presentation is going to be in 3 parts. The first part is going to be what didn't work, some of the obvious mistakes we made, things to avoid in the future. What has worked, and some of the successes that we've can build on, and how do we build on these lessons, and where do we go from here? So what did not work? Let's talk about that first. Assuming if you build it, then they will come. Well, we built a lot of beautiful campuses and nobody came. The assumption isn't valid. And unfortunately, this shows this huge disconnect between the builders and educators. There's just lots and lots of campuses were built, but nobody came. No faculty used the facilities. And most of those places are no longer in virtual worlds, definitely not in Second Life. This is a greenhouse. I'm a botanist, so this was like, oh, wow, I was excited when I saw this. I was at a university. I'm not going to talk about specific campuses or anything, but I was at a university, and they were having an open house the next day. They were just starting and showing off their campus. Beautiful facility, and the person who's doing the building was there. And I said, wow, you've got this great greenhouse. How are you going to use it? And he had no idea. So he had no clue. He had never talked to the educators who were supposed to use this facility. It was just built to look beautiful, and it does. It's a great-looking greenhouse, but it's not going to be an educational tool because educators were not involved. So that's a big mistake. Spending a lot of time and cost to recreate the real campus. We try to put our signature. No, a lot of folks put a lot of time to put their signature buildings on this stuff. And why? So we don't really need to do that. So what you want to do is avoid making. I'm trying to get this right. Hold on, I'm going to get the top of this in there for you. Look at this facility. This is a beautiful building. It's going to be the signature building on some major campus, but it's not very conducive to education. It's hard for students who are new to Second Life to get into this building. It's not easy to move around in these buildings. They got spiral staircases and narrow things and hallways. They're just not conducive to doing education here. So what you want to do is really avoid these and just realize you can build something so much better. And I asked builders, why do you do this? Why do you make these signature buildings that aren't very useful and take up lots of prims and lots of time and effort? And they say, well, the administrators want these. Well, the administrators really want students on these things learning. So what they really want, that's when they pay for them. And most of these places aren't around anymore. Nobody, they didn't get that. Another major mistake we've made is expecting many faculty members to come into the world and adopt it. Nobody has had this happen. No campuses get lots and lots of people coming in. And they don't do that for some obvious reasons. One, we're competing with a lot of online learning tools. There's all these open educational resources now. There's Wikipedia. Most of our textbooks have online tools with them. And there's a steep learning curve for working in virtual worlds. And one of the things we have to work on is how do we reduce that learning curve. And before you really want to go in front of students, you have to have a comfort level. You don't want to be falling off the sidewalks and bumping into buildings and sitting backwards on your chair. You really need to have a comfort level to work in these things. And so it takes some time. It takes several months to get a fairly regular use to get to that point. Most people are just too busy. Frankly, you ask people, why don't you want to be involved in Second Life? They'll say, I'm just too busy to get involved. Another mistake is expecting students to love it. This isn't a total survey. This doesn't add up to 100%, but these are different numbers from parts of a survey just to show you about 25% really enjoyed it. These are active, visual, hands-on learners who find it a really fascinating way to get in and learn. Another 25% roughly find it as okay. It's a nice way to learn. About 20% don't enjoy it. They just do it. And then we have like 11% who just hate it. When they write in their evaluations, please do not do Second Life anymore. And part of the challenge is how do you address the concerns of this group? How do you make it so it's less frustrating for them? They can come in and do these things and actually learn. Now, anything you do is going to cause some students are not going to like it, no matter what it is. I give papers in my classes for them to write, and I have students who hate writing papers, and my students do discussions, and there are students who hate doing discussions. And Second Life is always going to have that. Virtual worlds will always have that aspect to them. But how do we increase the people who enjoy it, and how do we reduce the people who don't like it? It's kind of one of the challenges we have. I think another challenge is requiring. Think of a classroom. I said, I saw myself doing this. This is what came into Second Life to do. A classroom with students. I'm up in front talking and lecturing just like I would in real life, and it just doesn't work. It really, if you can co-locate the people, if they're on campus, you bring them into a classroom. You can talk. You can use body language, facial expressions. You're getting feedback from them through that lecture, and all this sort of stuff is going to make it much more dynamic. You can see half these people look like they're asleep. And this is what you're talking to. And so it's the sort of thing where if you can possibly co-locate people into the same classroom, don't use virtual worlds for lectures. They're good for lectures when you can't. This is a group of students from around the state. They're high school students coming to a university for an orientation. And the high schools have people to help them get in there. They're really good computers. They're not going to crash. This is all set up for the students, and it's very easy for them to come in and listen to an orientation here. When you can't co-locate people like this conference, it's great to have something like people coming in to listen. But when you can actually do a class in real life, it's much better than doing it in a Second Life environment. Just because it's, as you can see, it's not as dynamic. You lose a lot of the dynamics in this environment. Another thing that's important, I think, is to is that we need to accommodate when you do lesson plans. It's good to really build in what are some of the problems you can expect. All sorts of things can go wrong. Regions restart, students crash out, lags, students can't hear, internet connectivity problems, all sorts of things are going on, and you kind of have to expect that. Not to say, oh my goodness, I have never thought about that. Pull that into your lesson plan and try to design lessons that can accommodate that. This is an example of a law school using Second Life for role play. They have two groups of students here who are representing different sides of a divorce case in this law school. and they're arguing this case out. It was quite dynamic to watch. I got invited to come in and watch how this works. The person standing is the professor. We were at their law school doing this, and in 5 minutes or so into the activity, we got a little message on the screen that the region would restart in 5 minutes. And we never thought of what we do. And the professor and I quickly talked about this. Unfortunately, this is Tidewater, where I have a space they could come and use. And so we brought everybody over to Tidewater. But you kind of got to think about those things. This is not just the real world where we don't have, my classroom never has a sign up that says the region will restart in 5 minutes. That doesn't happen, but in Second Life it does. You don't have students crashing out and having to relog, or they can't hear, all these sorts of issues that you can get in a virtual world. Another thing we can talk about is grant money. That can be a real problem. And so, yes, we do have fire alarms and those sorts of things in real life. We've had 2 campuses that I know of in the last 6 months that have left Second Life because they were supported by grant money. When your core funding, your payment to Linden Labs, if you have a salaried manager or something of that nature, when that core funding is dependent on grants, it's a very unstable situation, very risky. The whole thing is jeopardized, and as soon as that core funding is gone, and it's not, you don't have a grant to come in and replace it right away, you often get the campus closing. And that just kills momentum. People stop using it, and the momentum dies. And so this is a situation where if you're using grant money to get going, you've got to get your numbers up fast to the point where the administration is going to put this into the college budget. And it's not going to be something that has to be supported by grants. So sadly, we've lost 2 campuses in the last 6 months because of this. Their grants ended, they closed, and they're not there anymore. And they had some beautiful builds and some fun activities they were doing. I know the people who run both of those, and I was sad to see it happen, but that's what happens. So you want to avoid that. Another problem is discouraging innovation by faculty. You know, you get these builders who build things, and they don't want you messing with. I mentioned this was a problem at Nova when I first got there. To do my office hours, I have to put chairs out, and the students aren't even using the chairs, and talk to the students. And then at the end, I would retake the chairs back into my inventory. They did not even want my chairs on the campus. So this is an issue that you got to deal with when managers. If you're managing a virtual, you really need to work with your faculty and not be discouraging them to come in and do things. And this is just a prime example. I went to Tidewater. I left. That campus was dead. There were no students on there because they discouraged us. Tidewater gave me a parcel, said build what you want and do what you want. That's the attitude you really want to have. We had another faculty at Nova who was very active in Second Life, and she actually left too and went to a different campus. The first thing I did when I got to become manager of Second Life was to change this. And this is that exact same location. This is my office in Second Life. It's much better than my real office. And it's the situation where we're working with faculty, we're working with other people to make this campus beautiful, to make it for the students. It's inviting for students to come. It's a permanent sort of structure. They know where to go. They know where to find me. And this is the sort of thing that anytime a faculty member comes and says, I want to do this, I say, yes, let's do it. How do we do it? We work on how we're going to get that done. The last thing on things to avoid is kind of along the lines of the first one, where they built stuff without thinking about how you're going to use it. We also have stuff that just never gets changed. This has been around for a long time. I'm not exactly sure where this is. It's a biology build, though. And I've seen this for years. As far as I know, no one actually uses it. It might just be I come at the wrong times. I'm not seeing people use it. But it's never been changed. And you really got to always ask yourself, how do I make this more effective? How do I make this a better tool for education? What would make more faculty members want to come in and use this tool. And so that's a big mistake, because we build it, leave it. Building and designing, those are fun activities. But taking a build and making it a tool for learning, where you can assess student learning, that's really hard. That takes a lot of work. And it's not going to happen right away. You're going to have to probably change your design, which you thought was perfect. You made it, you love it, but now you find out it doesn't work the way the students don't work with it the way you want them to. And you've got to change things, and you've got to keep going back and looking at asking, how do we make this better? And not doing that is a big problem, and something to be avoided. Let's look at what worked. This is kind of more fun to talk about anyway. So what worked? This is a creative build. No bricks, no mortars, white space. You don't see a ceiling. You can see out forever. It's a tower, actually. And this is the sort of thing you want to take advantage of, the freedom of physics building constraints, the lack of these building constraints you have in Second Life. You don't need those big brick and mortar buildings. Do something more creative. And we're not comfortable with that maybe initially, but by now we should be. After, 10 years of being in virtual worlds, we should be able to do this without a problem. So the idea is just build it so it's fun for the students, it's fun for the faculty, it's fun for everybody. It's not just some old boring building of brick and mortar. This tower would not stand up in real life. It would fall over. But in Second Life, it's great. It stands up, and students can use it very easily. Here's our major signature building on our campus. We just rebuilt this last summer, and I agreed when I took over I would not get rid of this building. By rebuilding it and putting it into mesh, we saved 700 impact units, or prems. And you can see this is wide. You're designing not for the person who's been in Second Life for a year. You're designing for the person who's been in Second Life for hours. These are wide sidewalks. Any person can walk down these sidewalks with their avatar. Might not go real super straight, but you're not going to fall off. You see, there's no doors on the building. Anybody can go on that building. Wide doorways, huge. Everybody can get in there. We used to have students wandering over campus trying to find activities. Well, you see, we put this red telephone booth. They're all over campus. They're teleporters. And they'll take students wherever they need to go. Reduce that frustration level of the students coming in, and then you get more students enjoying the experience. So instead of looking for an activity for an hour, they go in the telephone booth and bang, they're at the menu pops up, gives the activity number, and they're there. We send students to other regions. And that yellow sign on the wall, the students can just go over there and click on that, and they get a teleport right to that region. Make it easy for them so that they don't have to figure out how to open the map and find the region and these sorts of things. You and I can do that. We've been here a while. But these are new people, new to virtual worlds. And so it's a challenge for them. We forget how that challenge was. That our first week, I remember everybody went in the door and I couldn't open the door. I couldn't figure out how in the world you open the door. And we had to click on it. And I didn't know that. And so those frustrations that we had our first week, we don't remember. But you need to design for that. Work to the strengths of virtual worlds. Some of our builds and things that we have, like a classroom, it's not the best way to use a virtual world. You lose a lot of the dynamics of a lecture by talking in the virtual world. The body language, the facial expressions, the feedback from the audience or your students, it's just not there. There are times to use it, yes, when you can't co-locate people, but by and large, things like that should be avoided. But there are lots of things that are much better in Second Life. This is a forest on our campus, very similar to the forest we have. We have real forest on our campus we can take students into. But the labs that we do in the forest, the ecology labs, they're done at a certain day of the week when that lab meets. We have labs throughout the week, and some are at night. You can't go into a forest at night very easily. It might be raining the day you have that lab for that class, and going into a forest in the rain is not particularly good. And also, we have a lot of ticks in our forest a lot of the year that have Lyme's disease. And so taking students into this forest, you can run into a medical risk. So going into this forest in Second Life, we avoid the weather issues, we avoid the nighttime issues, we avoid the tick issues. But we can still collect the same data. And the students can still get the information that they need to complete the lab. And so this is a situation where you're using virtual worlds to their advantage, where they can operate, and you avoid the snow too. Working to their advantage. This is the sort of thing that is important to do. Talking of snow, this is a snow day in our area. You want to be opportunistic and creative about identifying ways virtual worlds can help solve real problems. Snow day, we're closed. All the labs that would meet that day are not happening. It didn't used to be a problem until the college decided that any labs that are missed due to snow days have to be made up online. And because of that, we had a very bad snow year last year. We were closed for a whole week. And fortunately, I told the dean, we have most of the biology labs online and on the Second Life campus. And the dean said, put an email out to the students, to the faculty, said, you will do your biology labs in Second Life. And suddenly we had a bunch of faculty coming up, a bunch of students. We had 800 students that year coming into Second Life because of the snow days and the closure of the labs. But being there, having it in place, and recognizing how we can match up the virtual world campus and what we have there to solve a problem that the real campus has and the professors have. And one of the advantages of this is many of the faculty actually used Second Life for the first time. And some of them liked it. They came back after the snow days and sent their students in to do things. And so it was a great advantage for us in doing that. I talked about the fact that you're not going to get your faculty to come into virtual worlds. It just doesn't happen. Most of them, I think if you go to a campus, you get 4 or 5 people who are actually active in Second Life. You've got a great group. On many campuses, there's 1 or even, sometimes not even that. So how do we deal with this issue? How do we deal with the fact that we're not going to get faculty coming in? I struggled with that, and I said, well, give up on that. I'm not going to try to get my faculty to come in. What I'm going to do is make it so they don't have to. And so we have handouts that they give the students. They post this in Blackboard. The students download it. There's another handout that they give the students that gives how to get started in Second Life, how to get an avatar, how to load Firestorm. That's just a viewer we use. How to get to the campus. And then this handout would be for specific activities, cellular respiration activity. And students who are doing cellular respiration activity would take this handout. It tells them step by step how to do it, where to go find the activity, what to do. And at the end, there are questions they should be able to answer if they did the activity. They answer those questions, send that back to their professor, email or Blackboard, either way, send a photo of themselves there, and so we know that they are in there and doing it, and that's how they get their grade. And the professor really never needs to come into the Second Life. I encourage them to go in and at least do the activity. Some night when no one's around, sneak in there, do the activity. But most of them don't. They just send the students, they get the results back, and we got the students using it, but we don't really have the faculty using it. This is a image that they will be able to relate to. And the idea here is to promote your campus. Anytime you get an opportunity to promote your virtual campus and on the real campus. Because when I came in 2012 and took over, you could have asked 10 faculty if we have a virtual campus, they would not say no. Very few people knew we had a virtual campus. Probably about 5 people, the whole college. And now I think almost everybody knows we have a virtual campus, because anytime I can promote it, I do. This was a tour of the Grand Canyon build we put in last summer for the geology people. It's a great build. We have lots of people come and look at it. If you ever want to, feel free, just let me know and I'll help you get in there. And Day and I were giving this tour together, and someone took a video of this. As the Science Circle was the group coming in to visit this. And they took a video, and they sent this to me and stuff. And so I sent to the provost and the dean a little write-up and said we had this group, people from all over the world were in there looking at this. And the dean went ahead and posted this on a newsletter. This is one of the many things in that newsletter, but this goes out to a lot of people, and so they could all see this, and then they could actually go in and look at that video. You can see the URLs there for the video. They went and looked at that. And so just every time you get an opportunity to promote your campus, this works well. And your administrators see this, and they know that, hey, people are going in and doing things, and they're paying, and they're happy to pay for the campus. Network widely. It's hard to express how important that is, to network widely. This is a tour by the Virginia Society for Technology and Education, VSTE. I think there's some VSTE members here today, who might recognize themselves in that old photo. And this was in 2012, and the campus looks totally different today. You wouldn't even recognize it. But they came to visit the campus, and we'll talk about what we're doing. And most everything that I have learned about what works in Second Life and how to be creative in Second Life and stuff, I learned from other people and from talking to people and dialoguing with people and networking with educators. And so it's hard to express how important that is. VSTE's coming back on the 22nd of May for another tour. When they did this tour in 2012, they could visit the whole campus in an hour. Now we can't. It's going to take about 3 hours to visit the whole campus. So on 22 May, we're just going to visit some of the newer builds for them. But you can just see, keep coming, keep inviting people onto your campus to show. And let's go on other campuses and visit, go on other tours with educational groups and get an idea how this works and what they're doing and how that you can use those ideas and bring them back. You'd be surprised how many of the builds on our campus were made by other people on another campus and imported to our campus when their campus closed, or a lot of the cell area was just brought in from Genome Island. Mary Clark, who runs that, just gave it to us, and she actually put it in for us. So there's a lot. Networking just really helps you get your program going and doing things and doing it right. Provide a mix of activities on your campus. You never know what's going to excite someone. So we have a whole bunch of different things. We have a classroom, as you can see there. This is a tour that a college is doing of our campus. Their education department had a class in education in virtual worlds. I'd never heard of a college having a class in that. They came to visit our campus. But I use this for review sessions and other things, that space. We have poster sessions, as you can see up there. We have a medical clinic that does medical role play. We have the office area, as you see there. We saw that in the forest. And then we have a whole cell area. These students are floating around inside of a cell. We've recently added the Grand Canyon. You saw that. We have just added a Chinese garden where we have students coming from China who are studying English in China, and they're meeting with our students who are studying Chinese. And they're going to sit there and talk in both languages for a while. And this is just coming off the ground. We're having this starting up in the next month. So have a bunch of different sort of activities there. Diversity of activities is really quite useful. Another thing is, this is how we build. You saw that greenhouse. The builder made it, never talked to an educator, never talked to the person who's going to use that greenhouse. I had some faculty members saying, we want to have a brain on the campus. This is a brain, for those who have a hard time recognizing that. And so we went through a big iterative process. What do you want this brain to show? What structures of the brain need to be highlighted? And we looked at different designs and things. And then I have a grant for this, so I had a builder build it under a grant. We put this in as part of that grant. And the builder came and made it. And so I'm interacting with the builder, I'm interacting with the faculty, and we're coming up with a structure that meets their needs for the educational uses of this brain they want to have. So I have developers that I pay. I pay them money. I'm not a builder. I could not build this brain if I had to. But I have friends, and I know people who can. And so I use grant money, not to pay our Linden Lab bills, because that's not sustainable. But I use grant money to make builds, like the Grand Canyon, like this brain, and do it in a very iterative process with the people who are going to use it. I talked about doing workshops, and I've offered many, many workshops. And people, what I used to do, they'd come in, I'd give them an avatar. I tried to get them an avatar. You can only get about 5 avatars before you run out of what you can do during one period in a workshop. And so I have a lot of avatars I'd give them. And they'd all fly around and bump into walls and fall off the sidewalks and work on their appearance and all the things that you did your first couple hours in Second Life. And it was fun and stuff. And what they learned, there's a really steep learning curve. There's a lot of stuff to learn before they're going to feel comfortable in front of students. And they all, workshop's over, nobody ever comes back. So I redid the workshops. What do we do now? Well, we talked for the first 30 minutes about how do you use virtual worlds as an educational tool. Get them excited about the tool. The 17 different ways that we've identified that you can use this as a tool for education and professional development. Then when they're excited about the tool, show them pictures of all these things we're doing in there with these different tools. Then give them an avatar. And they kind of get the fun of moving around, but they realize, yeah, this is a steep learning curve, but maybe it's worth it. And I get more people coming in now from doing this. This is much more successful because they were, yes, I can see, I want to do a poster session, or I want to do, I want to have my students interacting in this activity. I want to do a role-play situation. I want to just meet with my students in Second Life or Office. There's lots of ways we can use these virtual worlds. And they got to get, what works for them, what excites them, get them understanding how we use this tool, and then get them an avatar. And they will spend more time and then come back and try to do stuff. So totally reorganize how we do our workshops. For those of you not familiar with the United States, the community college is a college that basically offers the first 2 years of a university degree. We don't offer the junior and senior or the 3rd and 4th year. And we take just about everybody. And so we have a lot of older people who've never played with computers. We have a lot of poor people who are a lot cheaper than a university, and they can't really afford their own computer at home. They don't have their home computer. So you really got to plan for that. And so we have computers available on campus with Second Life on them, with Firestorm on there. And I started, the first weeks of class, we don't do our science lab. So during my science lab periods, I started holding sessions in the computer lab for students where they could come in, get an avatar, get set up, get them to the campus. And for those, and I asked people to advertise this. So the students who are not comfortable with Second Life, who think, I could never do this, come in, they realize it's not that hard. They get their avatar, they're on campus, they're in the right place, and they're ready to go. And so helping students is quite important. This last slide about what works, this is a fun one. Put some of these things up here. What you're seeing here is a student doing an activity in a forest. And this is a biodiversity activity for animals. That's the BBA on that flag. Clicking on the flag, she gets a note card, and she has to figure out what this type of animal is. It's a reptile in our group here, and put it into a life tree for animals. And so we have a lot of invertebrates and vertebrates and different classes of vertebrates, different file of invertebrates, about 16 animals around on the campus. And I had the coordinates for each of these flags on the worksheet handout that the students get, and told them how to use the coordinates at the top of their screen. They could walk or fly to these coordinates and find these flags and the animals. I'm watching this student, seeing guys kind of monitoring how she's doing with this. This is what has been only been out and useful for like a month. And she just, boom, she teleports to the next animal. And now watch her some more there, and boom, she teleports to the next one. And the students had figured it out totally on their own that you open up the map, enter the coordinates, and you can go to the next. You don't have to walk around or fly around. I immediately redid the handout. Put that into the handout, sent that out to the faculty, said, change in this handout, get this one to your student, not the old one. Because this is such a better way of doing it. And so what you do, you've got to constantly monitor what they're doing, how to improve it. How do we make this a more effective educational tool and more efficient for the students and less frustrating? Always, always, always. If you saw the handouts I had in 2011 at Tidewater for my first activity, and the handouts today, so about 5-6 years later, they're totally different, and it's all from student feedback. We need more photos. We need more explanation here. Break up the long paragraphs into short paragraphs, this sort of stuff. And so, just constantly got to be working on improving this stuff. Okay, how do we build on what works and avoid what doesn't work? We have a lot of lessons here, so let's look at this. So we have many institutions, higher education, that came into Second Life with high hopes and expectations. Lots of campuses when I showed up. They're all over the place. But what we lacked was not desire or interest or expectations and hopes. What we lacked was understanding of how you design for education in a virtual world. We didn't make that leap from the real world to the virtual world for education. And it's really, really different. Because we didn't make that leap, and many organizations didn't make that leap, they got frustrated. Nobody used it, and they're out. Well, we know more now. We don't have to make those same mistakes. But so given our current understanding of education, virtual world, how do we make this an appealing educational tool? I think we can. There's no reason not to. There's 17 ways that faculty can use this. And students, a lot of students like it. It's a very hands-on, visual sort of learner experience. So how do we make this a useful tool? Well, what I and others have been talking about for about 8 months now is that we need to provide an educationally focused orientation that's designed to help faculty members develop an understanding and skills needed to be effective teachers. And we're not talking here about an orientation where you learn to fly and walk and change your clothes and use Linden dollars and sit in a chair. That's another orientation. There's lots of those out there. I always suggest that they go to Oxbridge. That's where I send my students. But there's a lot of them out there, lots of places to go. This is a follow-on orientation for the people who just want to do education, who want to get started in education. And it's going to reduce the frustration of that steep learning curve. And it's going to help them to avoid the mistakes we've made in the past. And it's going to get them up and going very quickly, hopefully, as being effective teachers in this virtual world. So what would we include in this orientation? Well, we want to discuss the lessons learned from our collective experience. Now, what are our successes and what were our failures, so they don't repeat the failures and they can build on the successes. Present the different ways that educators use virtual worlds. Some of this stuff I never thought about when I came to Second. I was going to lecture in the classroom. I didn't know there's other ways you could use it. Train on the educational tools and apps found in Second Life. How do you use a slide board? How do you use a web board? How do you write on a whiteboard in Second Life? How would you do this? Provide examples of interactive educational builds. These people won't be able to build. They're going to be new. They're in their first months in Second Life. But show them some of the builds, the really interactive builds that you have that are exciting and stuff, and they get an idea this is the sort of thing we're looking towards doing. Provide some SL handouts, Look at what we've learned about handouts. And why are handouts important? Well, handouts are useful because, one, by students doing handouts rather than coming together at one time, you avoid a lot of students on the campus at one time, you avoid the lag issues. If they're having problems with crashing or whatever that day, they can come back another day and do it. They have it, we give like a week or so, sometimes 2 weeks to do these handouts, and they can come when they want to. You'd be surprised, there's students on there at 4 in the morning doing this. Students are. So it allows them to be there anytime, 24/7, to do this when they want to. So it's worked very well. But they've made a lot of understanding how to do this. Give an overview of the different educationally focused groups in Second Life. There's a alphabet soup of these guys. ISTE, Virtual Pioneers, the Virtual World Education Roundtable, Rockcliffe University, all these in Science Circle. I'm sure there's others I'm not missing. But what's the focus of these different groups? How do you get involved? When do they meet? Who do you contact to ask questions and stuff like that? And finally, have a bunch of landmarks for educational regions, both campuses and other things like museums and stuff that are very educationally focused, so they can go out and see how other people have done. What are other people doing? What's working? What's not? What excites them? What doesn't excite them? I'm happy to say we have made this. We call it an educational portal or teacher training portal. It's at the Science Circle region. It's mainly been built by Hashimi Nashimura, who is in Japan. And I'm going to have a contact information for him for you. Actually, let me put up something here. I was going to add this that I haven't put it in yet. There's a poster there. Click on it before you leave. It'll give you the landmark there. It'll give you a note card with Hajimi's name. And you can, he's Jan Yuri in Second Life, and send him an IM, say you're interested, and he'll be happy to get you involved in the group of people working on this. We put it together. It's about 7 floors. It's a tower. Each floor is thematic, talks about different things and stuff. And covers many of those things we thought should be part of this of orientation. It's still a work in progress. We appreciate your input. If you have ideas, I think it's the collective community of educators in virtual worlds. We need to work together. There's not a lot of us here in the virtual worlds, and we need to work together as a collaborative group and make this as best experience as we can, and the best tool we can for education. That only comes through collaboration, in my thinking. And this is really what this is about. A lot of people have contributed to this. And if you're not one of those yet, please join us and be part of that. And really, that final slide here is really to develop, what we need to do is to develop sustained good mechanisms to capture and share the creative things that we're doing in Second Life in virtual worlds in general. OpenSim, Minecraft for kids, these sorts of things, and share this widely so that we don't make the mistakes of the past. We avoid those very obvious mistakes, and we build on the successes that we've had so far.